Welcome to the College Football Preview Show presented by Yolked. I'm your host, John Sarianides, and we are coming to you a night earlier than we normally do because the UMass Minutemen are playing at home tomorrow night against the Northern Illinois Huskies. And my partner, Ryan Barry, here, he will be at the game tomorrow night for action in Amherst. Ryan, how are you this evening? Again, it's a little different that we're doing our show on a Tuesday night as opposed to a Wednesday night. But I'm genuinely fired up about the Minutemen hosting Northern Illinois tomorrow night in the first ever action game at UMass.
Yeah, this is it's going to be exciting. I don't know how many people are going to be there, but I know that we'll be there doing coverage and with, a lot of other great people alongside. Freezing. It's going to be like 32 degrees at kickoff. It's real match. The only thing we need more to complete it is like a random snowstorm, as long as I can get home. But, we need something weird to happen tomorrow. And I think maybe that could be a UMass win. That'd be the weirdest thing. So,
well, UMass, to your point, UMass is the school itself, in terms of where it's located and how quickly the weather can change, will fit right in with the rest of the MAC.
Right. Oh, yeah.
We could potentially, probably not tomorrow night, but you never know. The week of Thanksgiving, you could end up having a snow game against Bowling Green. The point is UMass does fit the MAC from a weather, action, geographical standpoint, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah. And stranger things have happened, and it's going to be on ESPNU. RIP to anyone who's got YouTube TV who can't watch it, but yeah, or maybe it might be a good thing. But I'm excited.
Yeah. So are we, and we're excited for your coverage as well. And if you can't watch it because you have YouTube TV, then you have no excuse. You got to follow Ryan Barry because that's the best UMass coverage in the region. So make sure you follow Ryan tomorrow night for all your updates and all of your UMass football needs. As again, the Minutemen host Northern Illinois as part of action. We'll preview that game later on when we preview this week's slate. Before we get started, I do want to remind you that we are brought to you by Yolked. If you're looking for a safe and effective product to add into your workout routine, Yolked is that product. At only 47 calories a packet, it is delicious, safe, and effective. It is an all-natural product that tastes like birthday cake. Visit yolked.com today for more information on this great product. All right, Ryan, we're going to recap the week that was, and then we'll obviously look ahead. It's hard to believe, and I know we say this every week, I can't believe it's this week already, but it's week 12, and we are truly entering the back end of the season now. Heck, one of the programs we cover is already done for the year. New Haven played their last game on Saturday, finishing the season on a high note, beating Merrimack, and of course, Mark Powell was named the full-time coach last week as well. So a good week for the Chargers, but they're already done. We're at a point now where, in some cases, in a lot of cases, unfortunately, you're playing out the string. But next weekend is rivalry weekend. You have rivalry games. You got UNH Maine. You got Harvard Yale. I mean, we truly are at the end of the season here.
Yeah, it's always bittersweet. I think we say this every year, just like we say every week. I can't believe, but it's bittersweet because you're so excited for the slate, but you're also like, oh man, like it's over, and it's just the FCS playoffs. Just they don't hit like like the bowl season, just because it's so spread out and there's so many different teams, and it's not always the easiest to watch. So it's like you kind of really have to just soak in these past few weeks when you have these opportunities to see your teams, even if you're down and out. But it's still another 2 strong weekends.
Yeah. No, to your point, even though we're still probably only going to get 3 teams in the FCS playoffs, you still got a couple of weekends here to enjoy and get out and watch the games. The weather is definitely changing. I was at practice tonight. We are definitely taking that turn now where you can forget about the 50s. That's out the window now. We've now entered that time of the year where we're in the 40s, and it's only going to go downhill from here. The 30s are going to become more the norm, and before you know it, we'll be shoveling and putting salt on pavement. So it truly is. We're truly at the back end of the season here now, and most of the programs only have a couple of games left. So it's kind of sad. It's bittersweet, but we've put a lot of hard work into college football this year. Obviously, we hope you've enjoyed the content that we've produced, but it is crazy to think that I feel like we've only been doing this about 5 weeks now since the season started, but yet here we are already in week 12. All right, let's take a look at the week that was. Boston College losing 45-13 to SMU, of course. Big story last week was Bill O'Brien's blow up against Mike Gualtieri, who was a Boston College content creator, grad of the class of 2008. He asked him a question about Boston College in regards to the fans. It didn't go over well. That kind of became the story. It made national headlines. But the reason I mention that is that during that exchange, O'Brien said that the team would come out and play well on Saturday against SMU, that they were going to be ready to play, that they were going to come to play. Maybe they did for about a quarter. I was there. But by the time you got to the third quarter, half the place was empty. The game was out of hand, and it didn't look to me like they came to play. It was another pitiful performance by a program that has lost 9 in a row and is in the midst of their worst season since 1978 when they went 0-11.
Yeah, it feels like this team, like, just when they get in these groups, there's always, like, one or two guys you can write home about. Like, Lewis Bond had another good game, and I think he's put together a nice season. He's put together a lot of good tape for whatever comes next for him. But you don't want to be celebrating that. You want him to be celebrating a team that's doing well, and that's just not been them this year. And it's hard because if you're a coach like O'Brien, I mean, I don't know how you get to the podium every week. You've been a coach and you would know more, but it's got to be difficult to get up there and it's another poor performance and another poor performance. And you have to look in the camera and try and say, we're trying to get better. We're trying to get better. Cause it's just not, like, every week. It's not getting better. And I know the quality of opponents varies, especially here at the end of the season, but you can't look this bad when you have this team that was expected to win, 6, 7, 8 games.
No, and look, I will say this. I am a fan of Bill O'Brien. I think he is a good coach. I think he is the right coach. This season, to me, in a lot of ways, is hard to explain. You win 7 games last year. You go to the Pinstripe Bowl. You'd think at the very least you're going to replicate that this season. It is very rare to go the other way completely like they have. I mean, no one saw this coming. No one saw this coming. None of us thought that they were going to be this bad. We knew the schedule was going to be tough. We knew the potential was there for them to be bad. No one saw this, though. This has completely come out of left field. All of that being said, O'Brien is starting to come off as disingenuous week in and week out when he's sitting there saying, I got to coach better. I got to be better. Look, I've been a head coach, albeit at the high school level. I know that coaches have a tendency to fall on the sword and not blame the kids. But at the end of the day, it's bad coaching, it's bad playing, it's bad all around. It's a bad experience. I mean, heck, the clam chowder's not even warm in the press box anymore. Everything from an operational standpoint at Boston College this year sucks, okay? The only good thing is Lucas Smith and the communications department there has been phenomenal. Why? Because Lucas Smith is a phenomenal human being. But all that being said, I mean, and I kid about the food. The food's fantastic, but the chowder was cold the other day.
The clam chowder's getting a dig as well.
Yeah, well, their clam chowder is really good, man. It's really good. So when you put it in the bowl and you sit down and you're getting ready for the game and you're eating it, you're like, what the heck? I've never had cold clam chowder here in the 5 years I've covered this program. Yeah. It's a little disappointing. All that being said, though, and in all seriousness, it's falling on deaf ears now. The message that I got to coach better, I got to be better, blah, blah. People don't want to hear that anymore. They don't care. He's been saying it for weeks now. My advice would be to stop saying it, but who am I to tell him what to do? But I think at the end of the day, nobody wants to hear that anymore. And now I don't also think that it does him or anybody any good to come out and say, here's how we're going to fix it. You really can't have that conversation until after the season. But that's what the Boston College fan base wants to hear. Now, look, the Boston College fan base, a lot of them are still with it and want to see their program do well and they want to have meaningful conversations about solutions. But there is a certain segment of that fan base that has become unglued. They're unhinged. They're talking out of their arses, and they're making no sense, and they're attacking anybody who doesn't agree with them. It's like as if they're the radicals during the French Revolution. But at the end of the day, man, look, once this season ends the weekend of Thanksgiving, Boston College fans, the school, the administration, the alumni, they're going to want answers, Ryan. If he's back next year, they're going to want to know, okay, how are you going to fix this? How are you going to turn it around? And he can't go into any meeting and say, well, I got to coach better. Yeah, well, we know you're 1-9. Of course you got to coach better. But at the end of the day, they're going to want answers. Now, he did touch on the transfer portal today when he met with the media, and he talked about, that it's not easy to operate in the portal, which again is another thing I don't think people want to hear. He also talked about that it takes a certain type of student athlete. It takes a certain type of person to go to school at BC. All things that, quite frankly, Ryan, I don't think Boston College football fans want to hear.
I think you have to be tired of the moniker of like, well, we're, a BC kid or a BC student is just different than someone who goes to SMU. It's different. And yeah,
they are different. They're not as good right now. You're right.
And I get that, BC is not Alabama. You're not going to get a kid, who barely passed high school that gets ushered in because he's a great defensive end. Like, you aren't going to see those kids at BC, and I understand that, but there has to be some give here if they want to be considered legitimate, because we've talked about in here a number of times when Clemson and Florida State and these guys eventually decide to leave, they're going to be left there with their suitcase as the taxi drives away to their ticket to being in a relevant conference. And you have to invest, you have to make yourself look attractive, and they're not doing that. And
nope.
Every week we go back and forth about, I don't think they're going to fire O'Brien, but it's with how these exchanges have been. I know the buyout's going to be crazy, and I know there's so many other coaches out there that are going to be, or head coach positions that are open. It's, who knows if he'll be back, but it's in a really bad spot. It's starting to be harder and harder to convince your fan base and convince, your alumni, your donors that, listen, it's going to be better next year, because I know the portal's a thing, and we've talked about it, and as you just did just now, that it can be hard to get kids, but Dylan Larnigan was an Alabama quarterback, and it's hard to sit here and say, like, that's the guy. That's someone who
4-star recruit coming out of high school in Georgia.
Yeah, like
it wasn't chopped liver.
No, and that's what's got to be hard if you're a BC fan, is you're like, but we got the guy. Like, how do you get better than that? In terms of the portal type product that you want to get, and that guy didn't work out. So it's just like, it's really hard to sit there and be optimistic for next year with him coming back, or really just kind of no matter what. Because even if you fire him and you bring in someone, it's going to be another rebuilding year anyway. You're going to be looking at 3-4 wins next year, right? So it's just really tough times, and I don't know how to fix it other than, there was a great article written by you guys today, to bump that up about, just investing more in NIL, because that's just what you need to do to survive today.
Well, and I think ultimately it's a money thing. That's what it comes down to. Really, when it comes to fixing this program, on paper, and again, it's easier said than done, but on paper, it's an easy fix. They've got to invest more in NIL. They've got to invest more in facilities, and they have got to work with their admissions department to loosen up some of their requirements, because that's the only way you're going to get some of these 3- and 4-star guys into Boston College. And look, the admissions office at Boston College is notorious for being rigid. They always have been. But at the end of the day, you're in a conference with Miami, Florida State, Clemson, NC State, okay? Those schools don't have your academic standards. Those schools have deeper pockets. You cannot compete with those schools as you are currently constituted. So while it's great to be looking for a BC man, and it's great to be looking for a kid who values the degree because it's a 40-year decision, at the end of the day, the average kid who enters the portal now doesn't care about the degree. They don't care about the 40-year decision. What they want to know is, are you going to give them the bag, and are you going to get them ready to play in the NFL? If you can promise them those two things, your school has a shot at landing them. If you can't, they're going to move on to the next school. And kids are perfectly willing to sit in the portal, Ryan. You know this. There's thousands of kids at any given time during the year sitting in the transfer portal. So this idea that Boston College is at a different level in terms of their degree and how they view themselves and the quality of the education. All of those things are great, and you can think those things. But if you want to be good in football, the kid that you're going to attempt to bring into your school that can, quote, make an impact, they don't care about that as much. Like Dan Shaughnessy once said about BC, and I opened my article with that today. Boston College wants to be Harvard from Monday through Friday, and they want to be Texas on Saturday. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. The reality is, if this athletic department, this administration doesn't get with the times, you're either going to be a school that's serious about athletics and you're going to win and you're going to balance athletics and academics, or you're going to be an academic school that just plays sports. But you have to pick one here. You have to be one or the other. You're either going to operate as an ACC Power 4 school, or you're going to operate like an Ivy League, Patriot League school. And if that's the case, Like you said, if those schools leave the ACC eventually, you're going to be left sitting there, and you might as well at that point become an Ivy League or Patriot League school.
Yeah, and that's just my thing. And also what I think bothers me about that, Mark, and this is what got into it a little bit too. And people will say, "Oh, it's because he went to UMass," or because no, it's just BC is a great school. It's got a lot of wonderful things about it, and the campus is beautiful, and there's a lot of great academic programs. But you're still learning the same math as you are at every other school. The difference between BC and UConn is that you have better connections and you have more well-connected people. There's more money. The kid who's your roommate, their dad is the CFO of Colgate toothpaste. It's not some kid who's at UConn and his dad's the fire chief in Stonington. I think that's just what
right.
I know I'm getting kind of off here, but just
no, I know what you're saying.
But the sense of arrogance of like, well, we don't want to taint our degree with these kids who aren't as UConn and is a great school, right? So many other great schools like take kids and they still make it work. UNC is a phenomenal school and they take kids all the time in basketball. Granted, there was a little scandal about that, but these other schools make it work, but they're not doing it. Northwestern made a Big Ten championship. When was the last time? Within the last 10 years.
Vanderbilt is competing in the SEC.
Vanderbilt, exactly. These schools. So I can't keep hearing this bull crap moniker of the BC man, the BC education, because there's other schools that have great academics and that are still competing, and you're not. That's on you. So stop making it seem like it's like, oh, no, we're just too good at school academically. No. Vanderbilt competes. Northwestern is able to compete, and
Stanford was very good for a long time in the Pac-12.
Yeah, Stanford, University of Washington is a tremendous school and has way more research ability than BC does, and they were in the national championship a few years ago. Granted, I know that's a little bit different sometimes comparing apples to oranges, but I'm tired of hearing that argument from people that it's because it's just too good a school, because other schools who are also good make it work too. It's just you're not putting up the money and you don't have that commitment, and that's just the end of the day. What it is.
Yeah. And listen, a year ago, Bill O'Brien was building a monster, and people were printing T-shirts, and they loved him. Right. And a year later, they're 1-9, and everybody's ready to run him out of town. Right. And don't get me wrong, O'Brien has had some missteps here. Clearly, they have not done a good job in the transfer portal. Part of the reason is they've tried to limit how much they live in the portal. The other part of it is the academic process, the admissions process, and getting guys in. With all due respect to O'Brien and his staff, you're not going to win in the ACC at a high level or a consistent level if you're bringing in guys from Campbell and Dartmouth and Merrimack and Princeton and those schools, okay? You're just not. If those are the guys you're bringing in the portal, it's going to be hard to compete in the ACC. It's not a knock on those guys.
Right.
They're good kids. They're smart kids. They can play at BC, but you need more in the portal. And I think that that's something that they're going to have to reckon with now. Yeah. Because if O'Brien stays, and I suspect he will, you're going to probably have to do what Virginia did this year. Virginia brought in 32 new players in the portal. You're probably looking at 30 to 35 new faces on this roster next year if you want to turn it around. That's going to mean a larger NIL commitment financially, but you're also going to have to loosen up these academic requirements. Otherwise, you're not going to get Power 4 type kids or 3- and 4-star recruits who are in the portal to come here. Because, yes, the program has cachet and history, but as it stands right now, when you look at your conference and where they're at versus where you are, you're not in the same neighborhood right now. Those schools are making a much bigger financial commitment in football than you are. And it's not just football. Look at how bad the basketball programs have been. Outside of women's lacrosse and the hockey team and baseball a couple of years ago, this athletic department has not been great.
No.
So it goes beyond that. You mentioned UConn earlier. Compare the BC athletic department to UConn. UConn is 7-3 in football, the 2 premier basketball programs in the country. The hockey team is in Hockey East contention. They have been for the last few years. The baseball team made a tournament run last year. It's not even comparable. UConn's at another level. They're in another stratosphere right now compared to Boston College. So, and yes, BC has made a commitment to facilities. You got the Fish Fieldhouse, the new basketball facility. They have made a commitment. I'm not going to say they haven't in that regard. They could do more, but This comes down to spending money on talent. This comes down to the admissions process, but it also comes down to one other thing: support. And for all the people that have been bumping their gums the last 2 weeks on X and social media, attacking anybody that doesn't agree with him, that O'Brien needs to go and they need to blow it up and everything else, why don't you put your money where your mouth is and support the program? And in some cases, these are alumni. Support the program. Go to the games. Donate. Do something to support the program. Don't just sit on X with your stupid avatar and your stupid Twitter handle and say stupid shit. Support the program. Otherwise, keep your mouth shut. Nobody needs to hear from you. Nobody cares. Unless you're willing to have adult conversations, which some of these people are not. So that's the other issue. And you tried having an adult conversation today, by the way, and it didn't go well. So there's your other issue.
Yeah, and I don't know. There's so much more we could say, and I just think at the end of the day, like I don't think you and I are not, a BC being good is good for us. It's good for 100%. The region. It's good
I
for
love that
football.
program. I've been around that program since the mid-'90s. I want them to be good. And when they're not good, it's bad for business. It's bad for us. It's bad for Eagles Daily. It's bad for Locked On BC. It's bad for the Globe. It's bad for the Herald. It's bad for Mass Live. It's bad for everybody. We want them to be good. And some of these people out there who are attacking me personally, you personally, or New England Football Journal, you think that we're reveling in this? You think I love that they're 1-9? No. You know what I'd rather do? I'd rather be at the Georgia Tech game on Saturday with them playing for a 9th or 10th win, rather than them being 1-9 and staring at 1-10 in the face. So, yeah.
No, well said.
Yeah. No, and I think at the end of the day, it's disappointing that some people are reacting the way they're reacting. Conversely, there's been a lot of great conversation on X with a lot of alumni and fans that care and want real solutions and are willing to have conversations with people to figure this out. And that's been great. I've enjoyed those conversations, and I know you enjoy those types of conversations as well. So, certainly we hope that as this season wraps up, that the Boston College football program this offseason puts itself in a position where it can get back on track. UConn wins their 7th game of the season, as I mentioned earlier, beating Duke 37-34. First things first, what else can be said about Joe Fagnano? He has thrown 25 touchdown passes. He's thrown for over 2,800 yards, 0 interceptions. He has been unbelievable. I mean, part of me is like, should he be in the Heisman conversation? I know that that's a little far-fetched to some people. He's certainly going to be in the quarterback awards picture. He is having a phenomenal season. Skylar Bell, who, by the way, congratulations to Skylar, got a Shrine Bowl invite today. He's having a phenomenal season. Byron Parham on the defensive side of the ball, 10.5 sacks. I mean, the Huskies are rolling right now. They've got Air Force this weekend, their final home game. This team is well-positioned, Ryan, to potentially play in a quality bowl game and maybe win 10 games. It is crazy to me to see the job that Jim Mora has done with this program.
Yeah, it's they were down twice, in the second, or 3 times rather, in the second half. In the fourth quarter, especially going down 34-29, they get the touchdown. They force the fumble at the end of the game. It was exciting. It's just like that's what we want for all of New England college football. By the way, it's more fun when it's like that. And it was fun checking in and watching the end of this game and taking down Duke against a very, very good quarterback in Darian Mensah, who this was a low.
Who got the bag from Duke, by the way.
Right.
He got the most money of any quarterback in the portal.
Yeah, and this was one of those games that was like circled on people's calendars as being as one of the best ones. And I don't Fagnano for Heisman, I think it's not a very strong year, and I don't mean that any disrespect towards him. It's not a strong year. There's not like someone running away with it as far as a favorite. So who's to say he shouldn't? But like you said, definitely a quarterback award or the Davey O'Brien. But just another exciting win. They didn't really get the job done rushing as much. But Fagnano had 51 rushing yards on top of his 311 passing yards. And just again, knock on wood, still hasn't thrown an interception. But just what can you say more about this team other than they just find ways to win? And what Jim Moore has done is what you dream up of as a college football fan.
Yeah, now you have to have this conversation, and Kevin Stone brought it up about. I mean, I think they may never be more appealing than they are right now in terms of a conference.
Yeah.
So you hope that there's some meaningful conversation there this offseason involving this program and potentially joining a conference. Because like I said, they may not be as appealing as they are right now ever again. Like, because look, you're going to end up graduating Fagnano, Bell. There's going to be an exodus after this season. And given the job that Moore and his staff have done in the portal, I have no doubts that they can replace a lot of the guys that are going to leave. They certainly did it this year. But this is the time to strike while the iron's hot. And I think that this program is as hot as it's ever going to be when it comes to a conference. Again, as I mentioned, Air Force comes to town on Saturday. Our Andy Close will be there for that one. It'll be the final home game for UConn this season. Going over to the CAA, how about UNH going down to Monmouth and beating the 6th-ranked team in the country? And not only beating them, but beating them soundly 34-13.
Yeah, this is one that it just shows again, why Ricky Santos is the coach of, like, why he is who he is, right?
He has few peers, in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, they're blanked in the first quarter, and then they score 13 points, and they just run away in the second half. And I do know, the elephant in the room that, Monmouth's without Derek Robertson, and he's been tremendous this season. But Frankie Weaver still played well, right? This team still shut them down, and it was really nice to see Miles Thompson have a good game, and Matt Vezza just kind of finds a way to win, right? You really can't say enough about the program and what they're able to do. 6-4, poised for another season above 500, and they've got a couple more winnable games too.
Yeah, and that main game for the Bryce Cowell Musket next weekend is I think it's going to be a doozy.
That's going to be awesome.
Hell of a football game. Congratulations to Bryant, who picked up their first CAA win on Saturday, beating Albany 27-24. It's been a tough season for Chris Merritt's squad. They needed this one, though. Big-time win for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, it's not just program, defining in some ways, but, everyone was picking Albany to finish, towards the bottom this year. They've had a really, really rough year after some years of really strong play, but it's still impressive to go on the road, get it done. Elijah Elliott had a good game, right? Zahim Khalek with another huge 68 yards.
Zahim Khalek, yes. This was his best game since the UMass game.
Yeah, I'm shouting about just because I always think, he was the UMass killer. So yeah, just really big for Merritt in the squad.
Yeah, no, huge. How about Maine? Maine has won 6 in a row, man. It's hard to believe. They start 0-4. They lose to Stonehill. There's a dark cloud over the program. All of a sudden, they have won 6 in a row. They destroy Hampton on Saturday, 35-7, setting up a huge matchup in Orono this weekend against URI, who beat Elon 34-20. I mean, I don't think enough can be said about – we talk about Ricky Santos, but how about the job Jordan Stevens has done with this Maine program? They won 5 games last year. You thought, okay, if they can win 6 or 7 this year, now they're really on a path to where they could be a player in the CAA. I kind of think that they've surpassed expectations. I mean, if they had won a couple of those games early, specifically Stonehill, I hate to keep harping on that, you're talking about a team now that potentially would not only be in the mix in the CAA, but now they're in the mix for an at-large playoff berth in the FCS playoffs as well.
Yeah, I think I've said it every week now since they've been on this win streak that, if they had just beaten Stonehill, you're 7-3, and I just think that looks so much better. And it's kind of one of those, as a bubble team.
And I'm sure they're sick of hearing about it. And I've talked to a couple of people around the program that basically, I mean, when you look at the way that game ended, that sticks in their craw. But the fact that they have to keep hearing about it, I think it's almost served as motivation moving forward. I think it's a little fire under this team. I'm not saying it's the whole reason they won 6 in a row, but I do think that a lot of people looked at that game and said, we shouldn't have lost it. I mean, we beat that team 9 out of 10 times, and one time they could beat us, they did. And I think that it served as a turning point for this program.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be a difficult final 2 games for this program. So we'll see. But they're guaranteed, finish up, at least 500, which is big. But it's 2 really, really important games coming up that I think have a lot of bragging rights, not just for the CAA, but for New England as well.
Yeah. In terms of the FCS independents, Sacred Heart beats Lynchburg 56-10. And as I mentioned earlier, New Haven beat Merrimack 41-31. New Haven finishing the season 5-5. Tough season though for Merrimack. They could take some of the sting off, if you will, if that makes any sense. They're currently 3-7. They're playing Sacred Heart this week for the Yankee Conference Championship. They were to win that game, could probably make you feel a little bit better about this season. But nonetheless, this has been a disappointing season for Mike Ginetti's squad.
Yeah, very, very surprising. I mean, I think with the way that Aiden Pereira's played, I think he's done as best as he could with what he's been given. I mean, he's basically the entire offense. He's the leading rusher. Obviously he's the leading passer, but he's thrown more interceptions than he has touchdowns. He doesn't have a lot of guys to throw to. I mean, Seth Schweitzer's not bad, but he's missing Donovan Wadley, right? He's missing guys like that, I think. And if you're gonna have to hit the recruiting trail to try and get them back up, and I think joining a conference would be helpful too, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, and they've pushed back at the notion of potentially joining the CAA, but I agree with you. I think in the next couple of years, this program needs to join a conference because life is hard enough as an FBS independent, never mind being an FCS independent. I think that's even harder. Sacred Heart, on the other hand, 7-3. What a season they've had. I don't think any of us saw this coming. I mean, kudos to Mark Knopfrey and his coaching staff doing a tremendous job recruiting, rebuilding the roster. It's been a tough couple of years for them down in Fairfield County, but they've turned it around, and now they're set up to where they could go to the CAA with some momentum next year.
Yeah, I think that I don't think we did at the start of the season, over-unders for picks for wins, but I would have taken the under on Sacred Heart just based off of last year and how they've been playing. I was kind of suspect, and the way that they played was, this season is tremendous, finishing above 500 and beating teams the way they have, and can lift a pseudo trophy this weekend as well.
Yeah, no, it's been a great year for them, and I think that's the other part of it. They go to Villanova next week, and Villanova's been really good. They're 7-2, but I think if they can win 8 games this year, let's say they win on Saturday, even if you go 8-4, win that trophy again, like I said, you're going into the CAA next year with a lot of momentum, and I think this program really, really needed it. All right, let's go over to the Ivy League, and again, Harvard. I mean, what else needs to be said? Another big win for the Crimson. They go on the road and beat Columbia 31-14. They're in the driver's seat. Now, it's easy for us to say that the Ivy League and FCS playoff spot could be on the line next weekend when Harvard visits Yale, but that might not be the case at all. That game will always be big. So that's still going to be a big game. But that might not be the case because if Harvard beats Penn this week and Yale loses at Princeton, Harvard clinches the Ivy League and that automatic playoff berth.
Yeah, and it wouldn't matter. So, selfishly, I'd love to see that game come down to it. So I'm hoping that they're both able to take care of business and have it be a kind of winner-take-all type deal. But, I mean, I think either are, as you said, I mean, Harvard's done enough to get that at-large bid, it seems. I mean, it'd be very surprising for them to not at this point. But, I mean, what else can you say? Everyone knows they're the top dog right now. Hearing people in the booth last weekend at Brown and then a couple weeks ago at Dartmouth, like everyone's talking about Harvard. They all know that they're the big guy in the room.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, you covered the Yale Brown game last week. Yale beating Brown 34-22. Once again, Yale typically the last few years has gotten off to slow starts, but then they figure it out. They put it all together, and you're seeing that now. And obviously, they want that Harvard game. It already means everything to those two schools. They want that game to mean even more. But in order for that to happen, they're going to have to go down to Princeton and win this weekend. Of course, if you remember a couple of years ago, they won at the very end, and that led to a 3-way tie eventually for the Ivy League title. But you got to see the Bulldogs firsthand. What were your impressions of them last week?
Night and day from when I saw him last up in Dartmouth. Completely different team on the road, and I know Brown is in the midst of a kind of tougher season. But it's the way that they were able to get to James Murphy and Dante Reno every week looks more and more composed. And I mean, the first play from scrimmage when Yale had the ball to start the game was a 62-yard touchdown run from Pitzenberger. Like it was just, they set the tone right from the jump. And Nico Brown is sneakily one of the best wide receivers in New England. I don't think that, not saying us, but I don't think he's talked about enough. He had 2 touchdowns last week and he makes some really big catches. He always finds himself open. So just Yale's heating up. Like you said, they kind of have those slow starts, but once they get going, they're firing on all cylinders.
And, of course, we mentioned, or I shouldn't say we, you mentioned Dartmouth. They picked up a big win last week, beating Princeton at home 20-17. They host a much-improved Cornell team that, after a slow start, has won a couple games in a row here. So They host the Big Red on Saturday up in Hanover. But Dartmouth at 6-2, technically speaking, is still alive for a share of an Ivy League title, but they would need to win out and they would need a lot of help.
Yeah, it's they have two very favorable games with Cornell and Brown, as you said. So that's their saving grace, and they're going to hope that Harvard trips up. They're going to have to trip up 2 straight weeks, which is a lot to ask. But even just trying to maybe play themselves into the FCS playoff berth, bubble. I don't know. You win out 2 straight, and have a pretty good record. So who knows?
All right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And of course, Holy Cross, tough season for the Crusaders. I'm sure that if you ask the coaching staff there, the players there, it is not what they thought. They're currently 1-9. They are at Bucknell on Saturday, and then they wrap up the season next weekend hosting Georgetown at Fenway Park. But nonetheless, you hope if you're Dan Curran that you can figure out a way to win these last 2 games against 2 quality opponents. Both Bucknell and Georgetown are 5-5. But you hope if you're Dan Curran that you can win these last 2 games and potentially build some momentum going into the offseason.
Yeah, and it's, like you said, not the way they wanted to. And I even forget as well, when I was writing my UMass preview today, they only lost by 2 to Northern Illinois to start the year. And I know Northern Illinois had a rough year, but it's just the story of this team has been those close losses. Just the wheels have completely come off as the season goes. So it's just it's like you said, it's tough and far from the norm from what we've seen.
And finally, in the NEC, CCSU appears to be in the driver's seat to win the conference and earn the conference's playoff berth. They beat Stonehill 40-10, dominant performance by Elijah Howard and company. And look, the Blue Devils have kind of flown under the radar, but they've played some really good football here the last six weeks. And kudos to Adam Lechtenberg and his coaching staff, because after getting off to a rough start, and they played a pretty tough schedule to open the season, after getting off to a rough start, they've really turned things around. Howard being healthy, obviously, is a big reason for that. Brady Olson has really developed and improved as the season's gone on. This is a team that should wrap up the NEC this weekend. They are at Duquesne. But, I mean, if you're Adam Lechtenberg and your staff, yes, you want to win the NEC, but you also want a good showing in the playoffs. This is a team that's a senior-laden team that's highly motivated to make a statement.
Yeah, you gotta, like you said, you gotta strike while the iron's hot. You gotta take care of business, and it's gonna be a tough one this weekend. But it's the way that they've played this year. Again, I mean, I thought they'd be something like not a 6-6, but a 7-5 team, at best, and they've just gone out and shattered those expectations.
Yeah, no, they've been terrific, and they got 2 winnable games here left. I mean, obviously, as I mentioned, at Duquesne this weekend, and they host Mercyhurst next weekend to wrap up the season. And as I mentioned earlier, New Haven beating Merrimack 41-31. The Charger season is over. They finished 5-5. Congratulations to Coach Mark Powell, who had the interim tag removed last week. Ryan, I think he's done a phenomenal job. And look, we saw this from Stonehill a couple of years ago when they made the jump up. They had a pretty good first season. But when you look at the way New Haven had to do it, where they announced after spring ball that they're moving up to Division I in the NEC. They had to retool their roster. They brought in a ton of new faces. Powell gets the job as the interim. He had to put a staff together. They had to put a schedule together. For them to be as good as they were, the future is bright at New Haven. And look, this is a program that's been a Division II power program for a long time. They are willing to invest in football. They're going to invest in the facilities. They're going to invest in terms of the roster, the staff. This is a program that's on the rise, and they could be pretty good pretty quickly.
Yeah, and they didn't just beat, they didn't. I mean, obviously they had 3 of those wins against, Division II teams, but to be able to beat Albany, beat Merrimack, they showed that, oh no, we can hang with people at that level, no matter what season, no matter what type of season those guys are having. To be able to get those wins is such a confidence boost and looking into next year.
Yeah, no, it's huge. It's huge. And again, they wrap up their season at 5-5. You are watching the College Football Preview Show presented by Yolked. I'm your host, John Sarianides. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Ryan Barry. Do want to remind you that if you're looking for a safe and effective protein product to incorporate into your workouts, take a look at Yolked at only 47 calories per packet. It's all natural, it's tasty, and delicious. Tastes like birthday cake. Visit yolk.com today for more information. All right, Barry, you ready to preview the Week 12 slate here in Division I college football in New England?
Let's do it. And if last weekend you went 11-2, you had a great weekend last weekend.
Wow.
So just a shout out to yourself. The only ones that we were Monmouth and Duke. Yeah.
Yep. Did you hear that, Boston College haters? Boston College fans who hate New England Football in general, did you hear that? 11-2 last week.
Yeah, you know what you're talking about. Yeah. I mean, I went a shoddy 9-4, but
you know what you're talking about as well. Yeah. And by the way, lots of great Boston College football fans out there, and I enjoy interacting with them. So those are the people I'm going to focus on. I'm not going to focus on the simpletons that are nothing but negative and have no solutions. All right, speaking of Boston College, they host 8-1 Georgia Tech. The Rambling Wreck come to town on Saturday. Georgia Tech is favored by 16.5. The over-under is 58.5. Does Boston College get off the schneid here? That's a big number, 16.5. But based on what we saw last weekend, I don't see how Georgia Tech doesn't cover it at this point. I think that the gas tank is empty when it comes to this Boston College football team. I'm going to pick Georgia Tech, and I'm going to pick them to win this game by 17. They'll cover, not by much, but I think they win by 17 to 21 points, we'll say. But I'm going with Georgia Tech in this one.
Yeah, I'll take Tech, and I think that they can also cover that line. It's who knows with this give up factor. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be. I would have said the weather would have done something. It's colder, but that didn't bother SMU last week.
No, it wasn't a factor at all. And in fact, when you look at the weather forecast for this weekend, and don't forget, this is a team that likes to run the football. It's supposed to be 42 degrees and sunny. So
yeah,
I know that the weather's not going to be a factor. It's going to be a beautiful day. Chilly, but a beautiful day. All right, UConn hosting Air Force on Saturday down at the Rent. The Huskies looking for their 8th win of the season. They're favored by 7.5 over Air Force, who comes into this game at 3-6. The over-under 63.5. Air Force, of course, running the Flexbone triple option. So that'll make for a busy week for Coach Brock and the defensive staff. 7.5, though, I'm comfortable with that number. I think UConn wins this thing by 10 to 14 points. Huskies keep the good times rolling, in my opinion. And no, I don't see Joe Fagnano throwing an interception here either. He's going to keep his remarkable streak going.
Yeah, I'm going to take UConn, and it'll be interesting, of course, with the offense that the Falcons run. But yeah, give me UConn.
UConn finishes the season next weekend at FAU. It could be a little bit of a trap game. We've seen them play down to teams that are in that group of five. We saw them lose at Rice. We saw them lose at Delaware. So that game could be tricky next weekend. But at least for this weekend, I think they take care of business and beat Air Force. All right, next up we have, let's make sure. Oh, how can I forget? Tomorrow night's game. Northern Illinois at UMass. Match it for the first time in Amherst. Should be a fun atmosphere. I think there's going to be a pretty good crowd there tomorrow night because the students are still on campus. So I do think there's going to be a pretty good crowd there tomorrow night. Northern Illinois is favored by 10.5 in this one. The Huskies come in at 2-7. Not the year that Thomas Hammock envisioned for his program, coming off a good year last year, a year in which they went to Notre Dame and beat the Fighting Irish. Hasn't been that good this year. 10.5 is a big number. We saw UMass almost beat Buffalo earlier this year. Could this game play out like that one did?
This is so hard because it's just the Kent State game, the Akron game, the Central Michigan, all games that I thought would be closer with teams that were not strong, and they went out and got blown out. Northern Illinois is very close to them. Their quarterback play is very similar, right? Their running game is a lot stronger. They've got 2 guys with over 500 yards this year, so that is where NIU has them beat. And they've got a pretty decent secondary. But otherwise, UMass should hang with them, and it should be a close game, and they should cover. And this is their last chance, in my opinion, at getting that win. Will it happen? I'm not sure. It's going to be cold. I don't know. I mean, hopefully you can get some people there. I don't know. I'm going to take NIU just because I don't trust them, but everything is telling me it should be closer because of just truly how much they stack up. Because I do think that Akron had better quarterback play. So did, Central Michigan had that kind of dual threat and ability, but this is a team that they stack up with at this point in the year particularly.
Yeah, I'm going to go with NIU as well. I could see UMass covering, though. I'm not sure NIU wins by 10.5, but I do think they probably win by 7. I'm going to go with the Huskies in that one as well. All right, next up, we're going to go over to the CAA. UNH hits the road this week to Smithfield, Rhode Island. The 6-4 Wildcats taking on the 3-7 Bulldogs on Saturday. I'm going to go with UNH in this one. I think that they're going to keep the momentum that they've established going. I think that they're going to have a lot of momentum going in that game against Maine next weekend, and that's going to make for a fun game for the Bryce Cowell Musket. And it's not the only thing that's at stake in that game, by the way. A potential at-large playoff berth could also be at stake. But in order for that to happen, UNH needs to take care of business this weekend against Bryant, and I think they will.
Yeah, give me UNH. Hopefully they don't look. It's not a look pass game, but give me the Wildcats.
All right, next up, we got a big one up in Orono, Maine. The URI Rams at 8-2 hit the road to take on the smoking hot Black Bears, have won 6 in a row. Maine coming into this one at 6-4. Look, I think this is going to be a much tougher game for URI than people think, or at least it'll be much tougher than people thought at the beginning of the year. I'm going to go with the Rams here, but I could see them only winning this game by 3 points. I think that this Maine team is good enough to not only hang with URI at home, but potentially beat them as well.
So, yeah, just to be, a contrarian, I'm going to go with Maine just because of that. I think the URI they're coming into this, winners of 4 straight, obviously Maine with that, but I think this is going to be a really tough game on the road, and some of these games have been a little bit closer than they've wanted. So I'm going to go with Maine just because I like the momentum. I like being at home in a game that they kind of need too if they want to hang around in this. But this would be a really bad loss for URI for their FCS playoff hopes.
All right, next up we have the Yankee Conference Championship game between Merrimack and Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart won this game last year in Andover. This year's game will be at Sacred Heart. I'm going to go with the Pioneers here. I think they pick up their 8th win of the season. I think they're just playing better right now. They're the better team, and I think ultimately that's going to be the difference. They make it 2 in a row, and I'm assuming that this is probably the last year they're playing for this thing. But I think they're going to win both matchups in this rivalry. I think they win on Saturday.
Yeah, give me the Pios. I just don't like where the Warriors are coming into this thing.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. All right, next up we're going to go to the Ivy League. We have Brown visiting Columbia. The Bears have lost 4 in a row. You saw them last week. It's been a tough stretch for James Perry's squad. Columbia, a year after winning a share of the Ivy League title, John Poppy's team is sitting there at 1-7. I think the Bears get off the schneid here. I mean, I think this is a tricky spot. I think Columbia will be desperate. They need a win, but I think Brown gets it done in a 2017 kind of game. Give me the Bears to go on the road and break their 4-game losing streak and pick up their 4th win of the season.
Yeah, give me the Black Bears here. I think Matt Childs, has a much more favorable matchup this week, and James Murphy can really sling the ball. I think if there's one thing we saw last week is he can really throw. It's just he sometimes sails a little bit too high, looks a little bit not confident. But against a team like this, who I think is closer to where they're at, yeah, give me Brown.
Oh, excuse me. Yawn caught up to me there. Next up, we have Penn at Harvard. The Quakers coming in at 5-3. Of course, the Crimson come in at 8-0. If the Crimson win this game, Yale loses to Princeton. Then the Crimson win the Ivy League title outright, and they get the FCS playoff berth. It's not going to be easy, though. The Quakers have played pretty well throughout the season. They're not exactly in that upper echelon of the Ivy League. They're not in that tier with Harvard and Yale per se, maybe not even Dartmouth, but they're good enough to come into Cambridge and beat Harvard if Harvard doesn't come to play.
Yeah, give me Harvard as well, but this kind of screams like from a few years ago when Harvard was sailing along and Princeton came up on a rainy day and took out Harvard. So I don't know. I'm not saying that's going to happen as well. It was, just hope Harvard's not having a look past, hope so. But
yeah, and that's always the danger when your rivalry game's around the corner, right?
Yeah.
I just think that this Penn team is too good, though. I don't think Andrew Orich is going to allow his team to look past them. I think that they're going to be laser focused on the Quakers. And again, if I'm Harvard, I wouldn't write off this Penn team. I think.
No. It's always, and you could even do a Quaker bit too if you wanted. Yeah, you could go either way.
You really could, but I wouldn't outright them off here.
No,
I just wouldn't. Although I couldn't think of anything with the Quakers. So
you saw oatmeal. I don't know. I was even thinking of it earlier.
Quakers. I don't know.
Yeah, Penn's easier. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The same stupid recycled joke week in and week out is just easier.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, Yale is at Princeton this weekend. Big game for the Bulldogs coming into this one at 6-2. Princeton is 3-5. This isn't your father's Princeton Tigers. This program has really been down and out the last few years, but you still got to get on the bus. You got to go down to New Jersey. Bob Serace is a good coach. He's got a good staff. There's talent there. Princeton can win this football game if Yale doesn't come to play. They need to get off to a good start like they did last week against Brown. All that being said, I'm picking the Bulldogs. I do think they win. I do think they get it done. And I do think that sets up a monstrous matchup with rival Harvard next week at the Yale Bowl.
Yeah, they're hitting their stride right now. I like where Yale is at, and yeah, give me the Bulldogs. But again, Princeton is a team who's capable of playing decent if they're having that kind of day. But yeah, give me Yale.
Yeah, and again, I think you bring up a good point. I think Princeton can win this football game if Yale doesn't get off to a good start, turns the ball over, and isn't fundamentally sound. But I don't see that being the case. I think ultimately Yale's a better team. I think they get it done. All right, next up we have Cornell visiting Dartmouth. The Big Red are coming into this one winners of 4 straight. They're 4-4. Dartmouth still has a chance to potentially win a piece of the Ivy League. They would need to win out. They would need Harvard to lose at least. They would need Harvard to lose 2 games, and then they would need Yale to stay at 8-2, and then it would be a 3-way tie. It's simple math that I made a lot harder, but you'll have to forgive me. I've sucked at math my whole life. Nonetheless, if all 3 finish at 8-2, then they all get a share of the Ivy League title.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm going to take them in this game, But again, it's just keep it interesting because I think that's what Dartmouth is good at. They're good at hanging around and kind of seeing how the Harvard Yales fall.
Yeah, and they're going to need Harvard to lose this week to Penn and to lose at Yale next week. Yeah. They need to win out at home against Cornell and the next week at Brown in order for them to win a share of the Ivy League title. So Ivy League never disappoints, man. It's one of my favorite leagues we cover at any level, whether it be high school or college. It's one of my favorite leagues we cover. It's just fantastic. It's great football. It always comes down to the wire. Never a dull moment. It's a 10-week sprint. It is awesome. It is fantastic. All right, let's go over to the NEC here. Central Connecticut State hits the road to take on Duquesne. The Dukes are 5-5. Blue Devils 7-3. With a win, they secure the NEC conference title. I think they get it done. I think they go down to Pittsburgh, they beat Duquesne, and they secure the NEC title.
Yeah, give me the Blue Devils as well. But this, I don't know, it worries me a little bit because Duquesne's always capable of playing a strong game. So, I wouldn't be shocked if the Blue Devils lose, just because of the way that they're able to play, especially at home. But yeah, give me the Blue Devils.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with them as well. I think Elijah Howard right now, he's finally gotten into form here. He's rounded into form, and he's in beast mode. And I think they're going to be tough to beat if he's running the football the way he is. Stonehill hits the road against Wagner. I'm going homer pick here. I'm going to take the Skyhawks. They go into this one at 3-7. Wagner is 4-6. I believe they're the Seahawks. I'm going to go with Stonehill in this one to go on the road and pick up a big win.
Yeah, I'm going to take Stonehill as well. I think that they're not playing as bad, and I also think that it's not like Wagner blowing anyone out either.
No, and I was just looking to make sure that I was correct. Is Wagner the Seahawks? I think they are.
You are. Yes, you are correct. Yeah, that's what it says here. I already had it up, so that works. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, we're going to go over to the Patriot League here. Holy Cross on the road this week to take on Bucknell. I'm going to go with the Bison in this one. I just think it's been that kind of year for the Crusaders. I can see the Crusaders bouncing back and winning their regular season finale at Fenway Park next week. But I'm going to go with the Bison in this one. I think the Crusaders play them tough, but I ultimately don't think they have enough.
Yeah, give me Bucknell as well. They're just kind of they've got more momentum. But I also like that take on George about the Georgetown game last week.
Yeah, I think that they're at home. It's a home game. They'll be highly motivated. I think they'll come to play. I can see them winning that one. I think this game on the road, it's their final road game this season. It's going to be a tougher game. All right, Ryan Barry, any final thoughts here before we wrap it up?
Excited for action tomorrow night in another good slate. And like you said, I think at this point it's kind of all eyes on the CAA. That race at the top with a couple of games. With if Maine wins, they'll have one loss alongside URI, and then obviously with the Ivy, like it's fun watching those races right now, and that's what you got to look forward to for New England college football.
Yeah, it should be good, no doubt about that. But Ryan, I want to say thank you for taking the time tonight to do the show on a Tuesday night as opposed to a Wednesday night. Have fun tomorrow night out in Amherst. Again, first time we're going to have action in Massachusetts. UMass hosting Northern Illinois. Ryan Barry will be there. Follow along on X for all of his updates. He's also going to have full post-game coverage with Coach Harasimiak after the game and the UMass press conferences. Hopefully the Minutemen bring a win home, and we give this UMass fan base something to be excited about. Lord knows they need it. If BC fans, if you think you've had it hard, this guy right here and his fellow UMass brethren, go talk to them. They've had it way harder. So one bad season doesn't equal what they've been through the last 10, 15 years. So, yeah. It's easy to root for UMass tomorrow night. You want them to get the win and be awesome for the program, for the fans, the alumni, Coach Harasimiak. And by the way, hey, who knows? Maybe Thor will be a good luck charm for them in his first full week on the job at UMass. So we shall see. All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the College Football Preview Show. For Ryan Barry, I'm John Sarianides. We will be back with you next week. Until then, peace.